the AI market, basically. So um, here's the comparison of what Grok has come up with. Now, if you can imagine math and science, so basically Grok AI is basically a PhD level for everything. So you want to do research on something, you can use Grok. Now they've got different applications. They got Grok that's the standard. They've got one called Grok Heavy and one that's so one's like $0 a month, one's $30 a month, and their top one is $300 a month. But for some companies, $300 a month is pretty cheap when something like this can actually create app code, it can check code, it can do things like that. So on the math and science level, it's right now it's at a postgraduate level accuracy, and that's today. So imagine that's 4.0, so 5.0, 6 months. What is that going to be, right? So that's going to be it's going to change a lot. Right now, they're estimating the the basically IQ is at 150, um, above average for most humans. And so Grok, so that this is kind of a something that it's going to change not just surveying, it's going to change everything. And then just wanted to kind of go over this other one is called is VO3, and same thing. What they're expecting by the end of the year is creating a 10-minute video, interactive storytelling, which you have branch narratives and things like that. So will that affect us? Will we be able to take advantage of this for some of our projects, some of our, information that we're working on? Probably, but again, just wanted to kind of put it out there. These are the things that are affecting, or our society, and obviously our industry is going to be, kind of set up with, some of the things that are happening. So, um, how does that impact the surveying, right? Data collection, drones, LiDAR, pretty much, collecting stuff very quickly, productivity, accuracy, and, so fully autonomous survey workflows, real-time surveying. So you're out in construction rather than coming back post-processing a LiDAR scan, you can almost do it in real time. So that's kind of where it's going. So Connie, I'm just going to skip over these items here. So I don't really want to get into these other items, but this is the Gaussian splat I was talking about. So there's two companies that are really pushing forward right now. It's Pix4D that pretty much everybody that's you have drones uses Pix4D. This other one called Teleport. And both of these, if you look at the scan data, the left-hand side is point cloud, right-hand side is a Gaussian splat, which almost looks realistic. And then when you look at the bottom, this is not a photo. This is actually a 3D model using these Gaussian splats. So you can see the organic shapes of leaves and branches. You don't have to model it. You don't have to put a point cloud in it. It's actually just created. And again, it's using neural networks to put that together in real time. So what does that mean for storage, right? So back in the 90s, we're out taking shots. We got 100, couple hundred points a day. 2000s, we're getting a couple, maybe 1,000 points a day going out shooting. And then we started getting into LiDAR, millions of points. Now we're probably pushing the envelope of getting to billions. By the 2030s, we're going to hundreds of billions of points. So how are we going to store? What are we going to do? How are we going to take care of all this stuff, right? So there's a lot of things that are going to happen, and the storage and so data management is going to be a huge part of, I think, surveying, what we're going to have to take care of. So, Connie, I didn't want to go too much over. These are the for me when I created this thing. These are the programs that applications that I used, and these were all these videos are not videos. These photos are all just created through they were created through Gemini. So just typing in, hey, what a construction site look like with a robot like Optimus? Or, what does, just looking at these things within like 10, 15 seconds, boom, these are created. So as another example, I just wanted to show you guys, I did for last night, for the presentation. I just asked Copilot, create a map of a historical map of San Jose showing these, three different panels. And then on the left-hand side, I said, okay, show me what a surveyor, and again, this is using Copilot, a photorealistic surveyor in 1880 surveying in downtown San Jose, what would it look like? That's what it came up with. So this is what we're looking at, people. I mean, so this is going to affect now garbage in, garbage out, right? I have no idea what the map of downtown San Jose looks like. It looks pretty, but so there's the other side of it. There's hallucinations and there's other things that we have to be aware of. But knowing this stuff, the surveying side is going to change drastically. So I'll put that back to you, Connie, and move it forward.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for that. That's a great introduction. I would like to ask Gary Ratliff for the moment now that we've given a little bit intro about surveying. Gary, do you want to mention or how is this affecting you guys on the engineering? What are the prevailing thoughts and concerns that you hear frequently on your side?
I think it's just coming down to the input parameters of actually using the AI and what you can actually generate from it. A lot of the engineers that I've been working with and talking to about it have been more focused on, presentations, write-ups, reports, optimizing some of that information. But in the design side, it's really kind of focusing on more of, how do you get it to input the parameters you need? How do you get it to generate that data so you can actually design, we'll say, the road? Can I get a straight line or not? Or can I develop a spreadsheet that has all the inputs and has all this information so I can run my calcs? So that's kind of been something I've been dealing with is trying to figure out how do I specify it. But on the day-to-day stuff, I've heard a lot of engineers using AI with you know, really kind of optimizing and prioritizing their daily workloads in the sense of, you know, correspondence and other items like that.
So have you guys been tinkering with any of the calculations and stuff to compare the AI results versus what a human designer can come up with, or is AI still too far removed to give you any meaningful results on this, or anything that at least will make you wonder?
I actually had asked AI the other day, I was like, I want to create a vertical curve spreadsheet. I just want to see what I can get. And I said, give me the columns so I can find out, at each station what the elevation and what the slope is that goes into this vertical curve. And it generated a spreadsheet, but then it didn't have the formula go down 50 rows. And it did not give all the input parameters I needed so I could do my checks. So then it really came down to, okay, how much information do I need to give AI in order to generate that spreadsheet? And is it quicker for me to do it? Because then I
Hmm.
can, specify the requirements that I need, my given variables and then go from there. So I think it's really coming down to the experience of, we'll say, the user of ask
Yeah.
and working with the prompts, but also how much the AI is actually going to generate that information with what I'm looking for and that preference, I'll say, but trying to still meet the design standards I need.
Cool. Very cool. Rich has his hand up.
Yeah, to Gary's point, I think that's one of the challenges that, I'm having as well is, I mean, it's incredible. It's as a large language model, what it can do with text, what it can do with knowledge is incredible. And we get to the design, not a designer myself, but or survey, and we're asking it to generate the optimum profile for a flow line given these existing conditions. The challenge is how do we get it to see that? And so I think we're in kind of niche markets in a sense of we're not Let's see some places AI is really being used is to screen candidates for a job or something, right? There's 85 billion people who want that. So there's people creating input and output systems, processes for AI to do that for them. But when you need to design a flow line around a curb return, that's a very small market. And so who is there creating that process? And I've played with it in map checking, but I've watched myself really have to write a course on how to look at a map, how to look at a table, how to read closure calcs. And I'm creating this entire, volume of instruction for it when I could have just done it myself, Gary, right? I'd be done.
Right.
However, that being said, it is just one of the most perfect employees. It never complains. It works tirelessly and it makes very few mistakes. And so when I can find that thing, this is what I'm showing to my employees, like, oh, you have a table of values and you have something to compare it to, teach it to recognize what to look for, and it will do it perfectly for you. It will find every typo, transposition that you can tell someone, actually created that point table by hand instead of using a tool in AutoCAD. It's really, really good, but it's also very hard to drive it to some of the things that we're doing every day. Presentations, proposals, letter writing, it's amazing. But how do we get it to design that curb? How do I get it to look at some points and come up with some kind of analysis that I would do so myself? That's the challenge because we're a niche market, I think, at this point.
And it seems to be challenging our own ability to explain what it is that we do and how to ask it the right questions to get the right results. So that seems to be another skill that we're all going to have to dive into, and hopefully
That's
we'll
a
get to do it together and compare the notes.
that's a good point. And if I can give some recommendation, it's talk to your AI because I can't type that much. I'd be typing all day long. And so I just have a conversation, talk, 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 just like I would to an employee, teaching, describing what I'm looking for, giving examples, and then I usually get the best result out of it.
Thank you for that, Rich. Another interesting thing that I hear from Kevin Hills is that the Los Angeles County is looking into AI for some of their applications, potentially map checking. Is that something you can elaborate on, Kevin?
Yeah, I think they were just getting started using Gemini for Google. So they're working with Google Gemini to see how they can. Right now, it's going to be mainly for records of surveys, but can it recognize text? Can it recognize reference information? Can it recognize, standard, standard things? Problems with maps, it's unformatted or unstructured, so there's nothing that's the same, right? So it's all different. So, but that's what they're attempting to do. And I think, like you said, Rich, I think it's going to be interesting. Autodesk is building into their system is going to be Autodesk AI. So that will be coming, down the road, probably, down the year from now. But it's kind of like I think you're going to see like a lot of these little assistants, kind of set up for these little focused things like map check, because yeah, you're going to have the global, you know, grok to do everything and have a PhD in your pocket, right, for all this stuff. But that's great for material science and physics and everything else. But for us, we're kind of this little tiny niche that has to do higher detail stuff. But that you'll probably have an assistant at some point that will do that stuff, or they'll sell it to you. Somebody will create one and say, "Hey, here you go, try this," and you'll be purchasing assistance from people.
Yeah. Speaking of those assistants, I'm a Chat GTP and Copilot user. Some people want to use them all. I had to focus on some, so I pay for premium service from several different ones, just two in particular. And so I do find myself creating those assistants where I can create that set of instructions, parameters, inputs, examples, output, and then just go back to it, not have to explain that to it again. So,
Yeah.
and then if you do it properly, you can share those assistants with others in your company and they work really well. And And yes, a map's a hard thing to look at, but you can teach it how to see a map, and you can teach it that it's looking for a closed figure and it's looking for a line table, or even it got really complicated and fun. Look for a label on the line. Tell it what L1 means, and it needs to go find it in the table. It'll do it if you teach it, but it's not
Right.
something that comes native to it from its,
Right.
LLM system that it has. Um, if we're sticking on AI for a minute, I think you touched on it, Kevin. Um, I love vibe coding. I was doing it before the term existed, and I go, that's what I'm doing. I love this. Python scripts, Excel, Visual Basic. Oh my God. I can't remember any programming from
Oh
college or
my
high school,
God. No
and I
kidding.
write programs all the time now. I'm not doing web apps yet or anything like that, but if you're doing something in the office and it's redundant and over and it's dumb, I'll write you a script. It'll take care of it for you. Whether it's renaming files or shredding apart PDFs and getting data out, which I thought about when you mentioned the LA County. I can't recall who reached out to me, but someone reached out to me about, I think LA County, some kind of old LA City, maybe, I don't remember now, really old benchmark records that all they had left was physically like this printed sheet, like on computer paper. There was no digital text file or anything of these. And they were in a very strange format with the spacing and the columns, and the headers weren't on every page. It was very difficult. And they said, do you think we could use AI to create this database again, like in Excel, so we could, reuse it? And so I was able to show AI how to do it. And I sent it back to him and said, yeah, look, you can explain to it what to look for, what this means, why something might be in a column or not be in a column. And if you teach it enough, then it's going to scrape that and do it like that for you once you've taught it. Hallucination is a real thing. Yeah. If you just use AI and kick out something, it's going to make you look stupid. I'm
Yeah.
really worried about the feedback loop because so much now on the internet is showing up as AI generated.
Oh
And where
yeah.
does my AI go when I tell it to research but the internet? So, this garbage in, garbage out, this feedback loop of AI, I hope they're building something into these systems to recognize that that was generated not by a human, because it's still the human who's producing the best data for this AI system.
Yeah, it'll start falling into its own confirmation bias.
You
Yeah,
know,
definitely something
Connie,
to watch.
I would like to say, I
Uh,
mean, Rich brings up a good point. The thing with AI, I mean, it's all these different applications we have for it. It is a really good effort on the business side to start, with this chat GPT or Copilot to start engaging in that process, because it is, from running a small business, it really is a differentiator. The things that we're able to do with AI, with just from HR, from legal, from all different aspects of it, and so or proposals. So if you start kind of working that process, and you can that's kind of low hanging fruit. And then you can start visualizing how you can start using on the technical side.
Then how is all of this affecting you? How are you guys coping with AI, and what do you see coming around in the future from the manufacturers and also from your guys' way of how you support surveyors in the industry?
Yeah, so a lot of the AI, kind of with Trimble right now, is focused a lot with like point classifications for point clouds and things like that. And they are getting into more, what is it called, the Trimble live count, which is with construction documents and things like that. So they are getting really deep into it, and every day they're coming out with something like it learns, like we were talking about, it learns something. So with the point cloud stuff, you're able to teach it. If there's some odd kind of ball thing that you have, you're able to teach it what that oddball thing is and how that's going to be incorporated into your map. So what's for the future? There's a lot that who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
Yeah, so AI is going to become a grunt that identifies glitches and artifacts and cleans up our data, hopefully in a meaningful manner rather than introducing more oddities in there. One more person we haven't heard from very much, Tim. I know Tim McKinney, you work hands-on with quite a few of these things. Do you have any thoughts you want to add? Tim, between Tim and I think I saw Corey here from MBI here as well. They do tinker with, well, more than tinker with programming and some of the AI coding and other applications.
Yeah, sure. On the topic of AI, I guess, personally, I've used it similar to Rich on the coding side. And I find that it helps with those kind of barrier to entry items. So if you're looking to get started with something, it's always a good place to kind of refine and solve simple tasks. And, as you get better with it, you might learn some Python and be able to even, expound upon that and grow that skill set where previously it'd be a kind of larger barrier to entry task. So I've definitely used AI on that end. And I know as it grows, I think, it'll be easier to create your own LLMs, which is going to be, I think, a huge part of it, right? Being able to feed that data in. It's already a thing now, but as that grows and grows, companies could, create proprietary AI models for kind of what they're trying to accomplish. So I see that as kind of future for maybe some of the niche stuff that surveyors are entering into, being able to, be an expert in an area potentially and leveraging AI on that end. And then I guess lastly on LiDAR and data, really, I just see AI as it's getting pushed hard. I don't think it's for surveys purpose. Most likely it's autonomous driving and other things like that, where they're going to want to push the boundaries of recognizing objects in LiDAR. But it's definitely going to benefit our industry because a trillion points in a point cloud is only so useful. If anything, it takes up more data and requires more computation, right? So being able to feed that into systems that can actually give us the meaningful survey data that we need, I think that's coming. And there's already been lots of progress there from lots of the big players, Microsoft and Trimble and all those spaces. So that's what I've seen. Yeah, thanks.
Nice. I actually have one point of or food for thought for everybody. I do know that CLSA as the organization is trying to get our technology committee functioning a little more, be a little more lively committee. And as we're discussing this, I wonder if it wouldn't be beneficial to all of us, since we are a small community as surveyors, to have some kind of workshops where we can share some of the more advanced ideas, perhaps within the umbrella of the technology committee at the state level, where I know obviously we're all in a little bit of a competition, but on the flip side, we're also often collaborators and we're all going in the same direction in the industry. So please think about how we can collaborate. And even though we're a small community, if we put our heads together in some way, we might be able to get a little more ahead of the curve than if we all operate independently. So with that thought, let's see, Rich, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I liked Tim's point about creating your own large language models. Some of the big players like ChatGPT, Copilot are now giving the ability to train your own your AI on your own data. It's been kind of a scary thing at some point because you could be releasing a lot of sensitive data from inside of the company to outside. So I'm sure you want to work with your IT departments on that. But that seems to be something I'm seeing more often is the ability to link to your Google Drive or link to your OneDrive even, or link to your entire Microsoft domain. And it's a scary idea with the fact that we still have hacks happening and data gets out there. But you could be releasing everything potentially in your domain to the outside. But that's an interesting thing. And I thought I'd just something funny because I mentioned talking to my AIs. Another way that I might do it is I carry a little notebook with me. I got my screen thing in there, and I just write notes about like maybe something I want to happen or a program that I'm writing, and I'll even do little graphics of what I want the UI to look like. And then, as Tim mentioned, I'm starting to learn more about coding because it's teaching me about coding, and so I'm writing what my inputs and my outputs are. And I just take my little notebook with my phone and take a picture of each page and just upload that, and then I talk to it a little bit more, and it takes all of my notes and ideas and helps me develop my code of whatever I'm doing for that. So just an idea there for everybody.
You're a tech bro.
Yeah.
Well, he's the tech czar. Let's be
Right?
specific here.
Yeah.
Tech czar.
Yeah.
Me and AI vibe, man. We vibe.
I think a good way, I'll
Coder.
just chime in I'll
Go
take,
ahead, Steve.
I'm not on a panel, but one of the ways that we've been able to implement it here on a kind of a small scale is being able to feed it technical specs. So if you have something that is referring back to multiple specifications across Caltrans or different agencies, you actually feed all those via PDF or Word doc into an agent, and then you can talk to it. What's the specifications for GNSS surveys? And it'll spit it out, give you the references. Instead of looking through a 300-page manual, you can actually search much easier by feeding it all these different documents, and it'll take it, summarize it for you, and then it kind of leads you in the right direction. So it's just a time saver. It's little things like that, really cut out some of the time instead of looking at a document you haven't looked up in 10 years. It makes it really helpful.
Piece of advice, if you're following Steve's advice there, is that when you ask it for answers, ask it to provide a citation. Ask it what page, what section, where it got it. That prevents hallucination. Hallucination, that's a hard word for me to say. That prevents mistakes and embarrassing things from happening. And I remember in the early days of AI, I learned that this was one of its capabilities. And I'm a guy who likes to follow the rules, especially if I'm playing a board game or something. So another thing you can do is just download the instruction of Monopoly and put it in there. And then whenever there's a question, you just ask it like, oh, is that really how we deal with this situation when I'm pass and go? So yes, anything you have as far as a set of specs or instruction manuals, just drop it in and it's your best friend. I think Kevin's got his hand up.
No,
Yeah.
that's really interesting, guy. Like what Steve was saying and what Rich was saying, there's two things. Like one is the one that Steve was talking about is Copilot has one as a notebook, but Google has one called Notebook LM, which I found was freaking amazing, where you could actually put something that's very dry, very deep subjects, and it will create a podcast for you, and it will actually have basically a AI, humans replication of a female and male talk about those weird subjects, and they will go through the whole thing. So if I was back in my learning days of being getting my license, I would have been listening to that all day long, right? A podcast on boundaries, a podcast on whatever. But the other thing I was going to suggest is to say is this week is ESRI user conference, and they're coming out with this whole new application called GeoAI. Autodesk is coming out with their Autodesk AI. What is really cool is you don't really have to remember the command. The nice thing is the commands go away. Like Gary was talking about earlier, Gary probably has all these commands memorized on how to create the corridors, how to create this, how to create that. Well, guess what? I can now go into the natural language prompt and say, hey, I'm trying to create this application doing this, blah, 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 blah. In that prompt, I don't have to remember every single command, even though I've been using AutoCAD for 40 years and I know the commands like they're seared into my brain, but there's Civil 3D commands that I want to know. And it's just like, hey, just type in the natural prompt and there's your command line. So, that's another area that's gonna change drastically. Data management, being able to, do this stuff. Where do you store it? How do you store it? Like you talked about vibe coding, Rich, that Replit, you could actually create a whole website, a whole web application. So now it's not only on a desktop, it's actually a web application that you can share with your staff, right? So yeah, it's crazy times.
So since AI is such a hot topic, unless we have stringent objections, let's stick with that topic today. We're already 50 minutes into it. I have a question for Mike LaFontaine, who has graciously accepted and made time in the middle of ESRI conference to come and participate. So what are you seeing at the conference this weekend? And also, I would like you to give us a quick description of what a digital twin is. I know you're pretty enthusiastic about digital twinning. And for those of you who don't know Mike LaFontaine, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Connie. So for all those that don't know me, Mike LaFontaine was previously with the County of Orange, working under the leadership of Kevin here. So you can see where my enthusiasm for technology comes from. But now I'm at HNTB, which is a nationwide AE firm, and I'm on the technology team. So we have about 100 technologists where we are implementing technology to solve problems for airports, DOTs, rail, and other transit agencies. So a lot of fun. What am I seeing at ESRI? So I'm sitting here now in San Diego. I'd say to add on to what Kevin said, not only an assistant to help you with the geoprocessing tools, but it also pulls in all the data sources that you may be unaware of. So featured services that your organization may have, or maybe in the Living Atlas, which is public information. And you can say, hey, I want to create a web map with XYZ. And you may have all that data and you didn't even know it. And then you can say, all right, can you perform some analytics on this data? So I think it's going to be pretty revolutionary, because the Autodesk AI is just based on the data that's within that drawing, right? I think ESRI gives you access to more data. So I just wanted to add to that, Kevin. That was good. What else am I seeing here? Real-time information. That's becoming more mainstream. So especially ESRI is making it very accessible to add in real-time information from IoT sensors. And that's really the heartbeat of your digital twin. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. I got some visuals to help us walk through what a twin is.
Nice. Yay, I asked the right question.
I got this on standby at all times of the day.
Nice. Thank you. I didn't know.
So
It's his 2-minute elevator pitch, Connie. Somebody asked him,
Perfect.
2 minutes. What do you got?
all right. So there's the visualization. I'm more of a visual person, but what's the definition? DTC, Digital Twin Consortium. It's one of the more authoritative sources for digital twins in the globe. And they define it as, a virtual representation of real world entities and processes synchronized with real-time data at a certain frequency or fidelity. So I think real-time data is really, to me, that's what makes the digital twin become a reality. And as you can see here in this visual, the two visuals I have, on the left side, that's the physical world, right? And let's just say that security checkpoint, you can see it's backing up. And you're like, oh, great, what do we need to do? Do we need to pull in more TSA agents to help alleviate that backup? You have a few options that you can make based on your visual observation. But on the right side, that's chock full of data. So you're going to have data not only like how far the lines are backed up, but also you're going to have data on, the baggage conveyor belts, the screening, the throughput on the screening process. So maybe it's not necessarily a TSA agent. Maybe it's one of the conveyor belts is malfunctioning and the bags are moving slower than the other ones. Maybe there's a malfunctioning security screening process. So this data is going to help you make decisions. And then what are the components of the twin? This breaks it down very, pretty simply, and there's a lot more to it, but it has to start with a problem statement. And Kevin can attest, this is based on lessons learned. You have to start there, right? What are we trying to solve? And you have to be trying to solve something with a twin. So, for example, I'm trying to alleviate queue times at security checkpoints, based on that last image. And then here's the different components, 3D data, so your geometry, static data that's standardized, that's very important. And then you're going to have real-time data, business rules or analytics, what are we trying to solve? And then ultimately you have your twin, which you're able to make decisions based upon. And I have some examples here. How am I doing on time, Connie? I got 3 examples.
We're doing good. We run till 1:30, so we got half an hour to go.
Okay. This is an operations example. So this is a bridge in the Northeast Corridor, which is the busiest rail line in the country. And this bridge is over 125 years old, and it's a lift bridge. So you have commerce, flowing under that bridge, so it has to lift at certain times of the day. And there's also 125,000 passengers that cross this bridge daily. So it's a lifeline for the community and the economy in this area. So when this bridge is malfunctioning or breaks down, if there's any downtime, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in economic loss per day. So it's critical this rail line stays open. So here, this is a digital twin that helps us monitor and make sure the mechanical equipment, make sure the bridge is functioning properly. So you're going to have a 3D model, which you see here. This is Revit, for all if anyone's curious. So we have a 3D model of the equipment room, and then we're going to have a real-time sensor. You can see that red kind of bar there. That's measuring the temperature of the equipment. And that's what was important to the MEP folks. If it gets above a certain threshold, let's go check it out. What's going on? So
Can
you
you
can
just
see,
connect that sensor to the IoT term? I think a lot of surveyors haven't gotten used to the IoT term yet.
yeah, the IoT sensors, the Internet of Things. So this is live information coming from that sensor. It's emitting data to the internet, and then we're just pulling that data into this application you see here. And in this situation, you also have, the Revit model, which you see on the right side, and that has all the metadata, the operational information. So if you're going out there to repair this thing, you have exactly what you need, all the information at your fingertips. So there's, the model and everything you need to know. You need to order a part, whatnot. The next thing that we look at here
Are they able
is,
to monitor wear and tear on certain parts, critical parts on the bridge as well?
I mean, if that's something you want to measure, sure. And that's kind of what this measures. What we're looking at here is you have
Ah,
tilt sensors and you also have temperature. So obviously the bridge expands and contracts based on temperature. And we need to measure that tilt because if you have too much expansion, it's not going to align once that bridge moves down and becomes, because it connects to the rail line as well. So it has to align perfectly, right, for a rail line to go across it. So that's kind of what this measures. But sure, wear and tear, that could be done with certain types of sensors.
And Mike, what are those sensors? Are they kind of just like what you would? I would imagine is there GPS on any of these things, or is it mainly just a electronic sensor that's kind of vibrating, kind of knowing how far to go back and forth?
Yeah, there's no GPS on these. These were located, utilizing I don't know if it's total station or GPS, but these are located at one point. But no, these are not GIS. Or GPS,
Yeah.
temperature and tilt. And
and
they
this
may
is
have vibration sensors on here as well, but it doesn't look like they're linked up. So this is solving an operations problem. This next one is solving this is a construction digital twin. And what you're looking at here is the green is signifying the bridge pier that's been built. So you actually have construction inspectors out there every day. They have their device, whether it be an iPad or a phone, and they're inspecting each one of these. And once they give it clearance and say, yes, it's inspected, it passes all of our QA/QC, they say it's approved and it turns green in this application. So you actually have a digital twin of the construction process. And we're also tying in the cost component. So after each one of these is built, we're saying, okay, this is how much it's cost, and we can compare budget to actuals.
Do you have a time component there too, Mike, where you can actually compare
Yeah.
where it's supposed to be in relationship to the schedule?
Yeah. Yep. That's on the bottom. You can see the time component there. Yeah, so this is a 5D application, they call it. 4D is time, 5D is cost. And this is just another example of that. Another one. This is a 5D application as well. Go on to the design process. So a digital twin of your design. So this is a federated BIM model. Why it's there. Federated BIM model of all your mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And the goal that we're trying to solve here is the maintenance team. This is a rail station and actually in the Bay Area. So the maintenance team said, hey, you got all this complicated piping. Am I going to be able to maintain it after it's built? Like, I want to see this prior to us, finishing design. So being that we did all the design and BIM, we're able to bring this into a gaming platform. I think this is Unity. And then walk the maintenance team through their new facility that's going to be built. And they're able to understand all the piping and if it's accessible and they're able to maintain it. And do we need to add anything? Access panels and whatnot. And I'll go ahead and stop there. I got more, but
Oh, this is very exciting stuff. It's construction calculations on steroids on
but I would
AI on
say
top of that.
tying it all back to survey, it starts with good data, right? All that data has to be clean. It has to have the proper attribution. So just think about that, when you're out there doing your survey, making sure what's the end product? Could they use this in a different way? What other information could I add while I'm out here that would benefit downstream? And this is the downstream effects of your data.
And Mike, quick question. I don't want to hijack Connie, but for the people that are just getting started in surveying, what should they really start focusing on for their career paths as this technology starts coming more ubiquitous?
As your famous sayings, it's all about the data. So I would say understanding data, so like a data science, just how to work with data, what data is, and how to translate data is very important. That's what we do as surveyors, right? We take raw data, we convert it into a map that's readable to the general public, right? So we're doing it. We're not calling ourselves data scientists, but in reality, we're converting and cleaning data, making it usable. But understanding all the different verticals of, where data lives and how to connect those, I think is extremely valuable. And we lean on our data scientists a lot for applications like you saw there.
Have any other of our panelists been dabbling or thinking about digital twinning, trying to figure out how that plays into our daily business, if not immediately, maybe in the future?
Well, like Mike and I talked, Mike talked about it. We've been in part of the digital twin consortium for quite a few years, 3, 4 years. And there's a huge struggle in the industry for understanding survey control. You have all these visual, they call them visual construction teams where they go in and build these models prior to construction to make sure there's no conflicts. But during the construction process, it's a whole different world and making sure everything lines up. And survey control, is the critical path for all these projects. And sometimes for some reason they forget that that's a critical part of what we're looking at, what we need to do. So, it's just one of those things, Connie, that I guess for surveyors, we just got to keep pushing that, just like everything else. We just got to keep pushing that with our customers and clients about need for that high accuracy survey control. You can't just build these things without survey control.
Yes.
Yeah, I would add to that, Kevin. So when we're when we're designing utilizing BIM, you have to put together a BIM execution plan, it's called. So essentially, what coordinate system are these BIM models going to be on once they're designed? What's the data, the survey data going to be? What coordinate system is that going to be on? And until recently, coordinate systems weren't really a part of that. But one thing that we're doing is saying, hey, it has to be on this datum, right? And if a lot of the airports and agencies we work with already have a controlled network, it's got to be tied into this network. And we are seeing a lot of time and cost savings because of that. So I can't tell you how many times we see data sets come in that just aren't on the right datum. I mean, common, right? Seems it's common to us, but to
Right.
design engineers, they don't know what the heck to do with it. Like, oh, it doesn't line up for 12 feet, you know. I'll just shift
Yeah.
I'll shift all the other points to this new data set, or I'll shift my design, you know. So
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Yeah. I think also as the surveyors, we're in a unique position probably to really have a good understanding of precision, and sometimes precision's required for different applications to where building these models also we are probably in a more educated and better technical position to build these models as opposed to I don't know, maybe people who are just straight software trained and early technicians in a field uh trying to build the models. There's a little more vetting and forethought put in these things, just like we used to do. For example, when we did construction calculations, you are aware of the end use of this, so that might be an appropriate business segment for surveyors to supervise and business control is not the best word, but I can't think of a better one. I do have a quick question for Tim and Steve regarding the Internet of Things. I know we have a couple of projects in-house, but I'm not certain if we're able to talk about how we're applying some of these technologies. What are you guys able to share?
Yeah, it's at a high level, it's real-time monitoring. And so, there's a lot of different ways to get started in the monitoring space. But for real-time monitoring specifically, there's a few big players out there. Trimble has their T4D side of things. There's a Sensieve product that's out there. There's a few others. But specifically, you're looking at it's really IoT devices. They're either have a radio or cell-based backhaul communications, and you're taking measurements on some sort of interval and databasing that information to create monitoring, right? So like Mike showed, the tilt in the bridge, tilt sensors, you could have temperature. It really does start to get into some areas that are outside of the surveying expertise in particular. So, you're getting into water monitoring or things like that, vibration monitoring. But at the core is communications and radio, which, maybe some of us deal with GPS, radio, stuff like that. You might have some experience there. And then at its core, you do have where does it land on the map? And if there's GPS, you have that side of it. So, yeah, for a company, we're trying to get involved in that space because a lot of construction projects have monitoring, and a lot of big projects still use boots on the ground, where you're in and out, you're doing survey with total stations, and you're monitoring in that way. And there's a big cost savings in modernizing that, I think, with the IoT side. So yeah, feel free if there's any questions. I know I kind of just rambled on about that, but it's definitely an area of overlap with the digital twin space and survey for sure.
Yeah, the big takeaway too is for us moving forward is we're really good at collecting data, very accurate data, but it's how do we tell a more compelling story? I think it ties in with technology because you have all these data sets, but how do you actually take that and present it to a client who might not need all of the data, and curating that to the client's needs and being able to do that effectively and profitably. So I think that's really that big push. And I think AI is going to be a big part of that, is being able to take it, simplify it, and then be able to present those data sets to a client or whoever the stakeholders are in that specific need.
Yeah, one side comment, I know it ties in with the question Kevin had about, people just entering the space in their career and where do you start? And honestly, I'd recommend the fundamentals of surveying, like starting, not the book, but starting with measurements and positioning, coordinate systems, the legal side, because at the end of the day, technology is a tool and it can be misused and it might look better and it might be faster, but if you don't know the fundamentals, you can end up in a world of hurt. And I know Kevin brought that in with control in that conversation, where LiDAR, for instance, LiDAR is a ground-based technology. It's measuring ground measurements. And half of the softwares are using EPSG grid coordinate systems. Are people asking the right questions? Is this software accounting for scaling and grid and ground? And is that a factor on my 4-mile roadway project, right? So you're running into these things, and I think technology is great and it helps. But if you don't really know the fundamentals of what matters in survey, you need to know how to apply that, right? So I see that a lot in the LiDAR space and in control, where you really do got to be a surveyor at your heart, to be able to apply those things in our space, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Tim. It's like the differentiator between what we do and, everybody else, right? Like, yeah, anybody can grab a drone and fly it and, collect data. Where is it? What is it? How do you quantify it? That's what I would also suggest too, is like for the surveyors, young surveyors out there, just like you said, really understand that survey control error, understand error theory, that kind of stuff, because that's going to be really critical for these things that we're going to be going into in the future.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that I always say make us professionals versus just measures is the fact that we can understand our results. We can produce accuracy statements, vet the data, and have some scientific rigor and proof behind the data that we're doing rather than just, a computer or an instrument spit it out and I really didn't know what I was putting in. And that then reduce whoever ends up using our data, that reduces their liability, and that's our job to make sure that they have sound data. Another point that I wanted to mention, especially either for our youngsters or those who have not had a chance to dig deeper in technology, one of the struggles that a lot of people who have to transition go through is just understanding the vocabulary. There's a lot of new terms in technology that unless you are a little bit of a nerd like me and read these things at night, you're not going to pick up the terminology. You can actually make use of AI. Take this very video, run it through AI, get a synopsis, and then start asking AI what some of those terms mean, and give yourself a little bit of a liberty to fall into 2 or 3 rabbit holes, time permitting, of what the terminology really means and how it relates to surveying. We haven't taken any questions from the audience, and I don't see very many questions from the audience, but I would encourage more questions. I do see a question from Greg Fowler. Is survey control incorporated into the digital models? And I think Mike already answered that to a degree, that survey control is critical in digital twinning.
Yeah, it's not common, I'll be honest, but yeah, it's critical for, we've seen a lot of success when we have written that into the BIM execution plans.
Yeah, and this is another avenue where surveyors might be able to get a little hold of the market, is figuring out how to be efficient at data collection. As a reminder for surveyors, we're not limited to working with high precision data only. Of course, there's a significant, probably handling high precision data, it tends to be a little more lucrative, but at the same time, there's potentially going to be a lot of surveyors who need to be employed as well. So may not be a bad idea for us to look into preserving some of these market segments within surveying rather than letting a lot of side businesses take that market segment.
Mike or Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the challenges with survey control, let's say in a digital twin or in a GIS world, is the lack of recognition of it as an actual feature. Like it doesn't really have an entity, that said, hey, this is a survey control point. I- I've seen a few times in different presentations of the ideas of like, putting a toothpick through all these layers of GIS because generally the GIS users, it's like, hey, we want it in this projection or this datum. It's all over the place. But was there really a control point? Was there a physical reference station or monument or something that actually existed with the data? So as it goes here and goes there, there's a reference to get it back somewhere where it was. You don't really see that in GIS so much. I mean, you can create a point, of course, but I don't know if you see that in the digital twins, but we can talk all day about metadata and datums and it's NAT 83. We don't know what epic it's on. So we can call out all kinds of control, but without some kind of physical tie that can be checked into and used again, which is how we're very comfortable as surveyors. Everything's relative to something physical that we want to touch. Maybe that's a challenge in the digital twin and GIS world and why it's so hard to have control.
Mike, I think I'm not as familiar with Rev. I know they have the survey control point where they can actually, because typically architects live in a 0-0 world, right? They don't work in the regular world, so they like to be 0-0 and 90. So they do have control points where you can say, okay, this control point is 2 million, 6 million, blah blah blah. This is this for the survey, so it's lined up, but it's in itself. So it's basically a user coordinate system. So
I know what you're
itself, it's
talking about,
zero.
Kevin.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen that. It's more like given like, well, here's what our origin represents in the survey world, but it's still here's a bunch of planes and points, and it doesn't
It's
have
got to
something in there that
be a
is a survey
contract.
control
Yeah.
point. And as we get new datums out, maybe the realization of those datums is no longer a monument in the ground or a control point in the ground. At least one of the core stations or something could be part of the framework or a layer that moves along with everything else. So when someone kicks it out in UTM-11 or whatever they want to do with it, at least the control's still there to know what it really is when you go look at that lat
Yeah.
long or projection value.
I don't know, maybe Gary, I don't know if since you worked in California, Utah, different places, are there any differences between some of the construction documents and what they're requiring for survey control?
You put me on the spot, Kevin. Now I gotta actually think through it and think about all my different projects in the survey control.
Or is it just like, hey, just one of those things, put it on the survey, worry about the surveyor to get it all controlled.
And I speak specifically to your digital twin and your GIS is different from the CAD file because CAD files the surveyors have been a part of for so long, and even the engineers, they all recognize, hey, there's survey points there, and as they move shit around, so what? The points go with it, and we can figure it all out. We can figure out that 12-foot shift, that whatever happened.
Well, I also just like for everybody, the digital twin really isn't only for buildings, right? Like Caltrans is putting a lot of effort into their new world. So they want to have this whole circular beginning to end in the BIM world and kind of a BIM, they call it BIM for I, BIM for infrastructure. But they're going to be kind of leading the charge, and we're all going to be having to get ourselves up to speed on that. So there are going to be, like you said, Rich, there's going to be a lot of issues there with how do you get the contractor to bring in, a point cloud or a 3D representation without control, right? So yeah, that's a huge, huge thing that we're going to have to kind of work out.
Well, we're we're on our last 10 minutes. I see a Brandon, you've raised your hand. What did you want to chime in?
I did. Thank you for that. So Brandon Thompson here with CSDS. Last week, I actually spent a good amount of time with Caltrans to kind of echo a little bit what Kevin was saying there, that whole BIM for I idea that they're coming up with, which is kind of that BIM for infrastructure, which kind of takes, that includes a component of this that we've been talking about, which is that digital twin, and it applies some of that additional dimensions to it. So the digital twin is going to give you that 3D kind of idea of planning, from survey to construction, all the way through as built, and sort of treating it like an asset. But it introduces those other kind of concepts, the 4D idea, where we're talking about integrating time and scheduling, the 5D, which is kind of that cost. But Caltrans is looking at it a little bit past there too, and getting into those ridiculous. We're going to be start talking about 60, 70, 25D, 40D, whatever we're going. But we start talking about like sustainability and life cycle and asset management, facility management type of things that are all being tied together. And the question was sort of like, how do you incorporate something as simple like survey control, which is where a lot of their projects are starting. And so they're going down the route leveraging heavily with Trimble, leveraging a platform called Trimble Connect, which is sort of, it does exactly what the name implies, which is it starts connecting various industries, trades, and softwares together with kind of a common data environment for sharing data. So they're leveraging that kind of starts with surveys, with their initial planning, their initial field work, transfers it through the construction planning, where they're leveraging things like Tekla structures, Revit, from a design standpoint, and then transferring that same type of data to construction teams that are leveraging Connect as well. And then the idea there is it's, during the construction phasing, they're tracking costs, they're tracking materials, they're tracking assets using, the idea is to kind of standardize it with Trimble Access, which is the field collection software, using a standard data library that's going to start having cost elements, material tracking, standardizing numbers that are tied to contract numbers, route numbers. So all this data is going to kind of live in this one little world that's ultimately going to end up in a, sort of a geodatabase of way that starts to be shared, transferred, and that becomes not only just a way to plan, not just a way to construct, but it kind of creates that true sort of 3D asset for Caltrans and other DOTs in the future, of basically a full 3D infrastructure of what they have done, what they want to do. And you talk about physical monumentation, that becomes an asset in that library. And since assets can have costs, assets can have something tangible to hold on to. So the idea is it's going to allow them to kind of plan all this out, and it's really exciting. It was great to spend. We had 70 something people, Trimble, Caltrans, a few other folks in the office there, the district office in Santa Ana last week. Awesome time, awesome conversation. Great to see the big picture, and we're real excited to kind of help them support it with along with Trimble, ESRI, Bentley, Autodesk. All of us are kind of putting our heads together to figure out how do we support this and moving forward. But it's definitely a big picture item, and kind of extending it from a little BIM concept to a big BIM, which is this idea that everything kind of lives together and lives harmonious with data, time, and assets. So wanted to add that a little bit.
That's wonderful information. Yeah, no, that's great because we all get stuck in our little tunnels of individual disciplines and forget that others exist until we have to talk to them, which is usually a little bit too late. Shannon, I have a question for you. You're kind of at the helm of a medium and rapidly growing company. How do you see this affecting you business wise on any strategic planning that you have to do for the future?
Well, I mean, we're all faced with the same challenges of trying to find people, right? So the conventional wisdom is that by adapting the technology, it is a way for us to overcome some of the shortages and staffing that's available, right? So we're looking at it that way. It's an opportunity on that side of it. The challenges are, how do we, as an industry, as we look at that, particularly if it's a decrease in hours over time, but we're selling products, how do we get, enough bang for our buck, and how do we price it so that, do we look at the same model we've always used of, multiples of hours worked, right? So it's a challenge we're all going to have. The one of the things we're kind of looking at, how do we deal with that? But I think just, at its core, like anything else, if you're going to compete in this industry, you have to find a way to constantly adapt. And definitely with the boon of AI, I mean, it just accelerates it.
in my career, when I came out of college in the mid '90s, GPS was just starting to get going, and that was like a big thing. And now this is just, I think, Kevin, you had that graph showing the increase over time of this logarithmic increase. So it's a bit of a run on, Connie, but I mean it is daunting. But at the end of the day, we have to figure out how to embrace it, how to use it, how to leverage it, right? So that's my approach.
I think that's
Nice.
the key, right? That's the key for all of us is like, how do we deal with, like, as a profession, how do we keep relevant? How do we keep ourselves, going forward and not get run over? And I think these kind of conversations are so critical for us to understand. Okay, what are other people doing? How do we do this? Otherwise, we're gonna get run over by the GIS crowd.
Yeah. And I mean, even though this seems like a lengthy conversation, we're barely just scratching the surface. This really warrants some serious thinking and drilling into it and looking at every now and then I tinker with the idea of how do we write a business plans for surveying as a profession.
Yeah.
So, maybe we can come together maybe at the CLSA state levels and talk about this some more, potentially revive our technology committee, um, and have some workshops where we can share ideas or even tinker with AI to see to compare notes. So, with 2 minutes left, I really want to thank you all for your time and your interest and willingness to come here and talk about this, and especially for your ability to think on your feet and contribute. You've all done fantastic, and I'm sure the audience, in addition to myself, are very grateful for your wisdom and what you've been able to share today. Quick reminder, if you want to continue some of these conversations or start some new ones, we have Beers and Bearings Mixer coming up on July 31st, which is 2 weeks from now on Thursday. It will be at Golden Road Brewery. Attendance is free. You're responsible for your own drinks. And we're asking for companies to donate for appetizer purchases, since you're no longer paying for the employees to attend. And I do encourage people all skill levels to come. We have younger people who want to make some friends. We have mid-career people who want to network. We have company owners and managers who want to get to know who is in the industry and possibly offer mentorships, people looking for mentorships. So please come and enjoy our mixer. And thank you, everybody, for your time.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
Connie.
Connie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Connie.